In this video, I'll be going through the June 2019 paper 3, so let's make a start. Question 1, we have a Venn diagram. This first one bit here, that's called the universal set. So that's all the values that go outside. I tend to start with looking at the values inside the circle, so that'll be A and B, and I can straight away notice that if I just grab my highlighter, I can notice that 9 is shared across both. And then I can also notice that 6 is shared across both. So those will go in the center of the circle. That's going to be 6 and 9. And then inside A, I have 1, 5, and 8. And inside B, I have 2. And now I'm going to look at the universal set, which is this bit outside. So that leaves me with 1, but 1's already being used in A. Then 2 is already being used in B. Then I have 3, so I can put 3 there. Then I have 4, which isn't being used anywhere either. 5 is being used inside A, 6 is also being used, 7 is not being used, 8 is being used by A, and 9 is being used as well. So that leaves me with 3, 4, and 7 outside. Part B asks to find the probability that the number is in the set A and B. So A and B is this bit in the middle here. So there's 2 numbers out of a total of 9 numbers. So that's 2 out of 9, the probability for that one. Moving on to question 2. Katie invests 200,000 in a savings account for 4 years. The account pays compound interest of 1.5% per annum. Calculate the amount of interest Katie will get at the end of 4 years. So it's 1.5% per annum. So we have 1.5%. Percentage is out of 100. So we're going to add on 200%. So that gives us 101.5%. And for our calculations, we're going to write it in decimals as 1.015. So all I've done is divided by 100, which is hop the decimal twice to the left and converted that from a percentage to a decimal. So that is going to be then 200,000. Actually, I'll leave this out. Times 1.015. And we're going to raise that to the power of 4 because it says 4 years. Type that in a calculator and we get 212,272 pounds and 71 pence. Now it says calculate the total amount of interest she'll pay at the end of 4 years. So they're just asking for the interest. So we're going to subtract that from the amount she had at the start. So that's going to be 212,272.71 minus 200,000. And that is 12,272 pounds and 71 pence. Moving on to question 3, the table shows information about heights of 80 plants. Find the class interval that contains the median. To find the median, you do the total, which is n, plus 1 divided by 2. We're told the total is 80. So 81 divided by 2 is 40.5. And now we need to find what class interval that sits inside. So the first one is 7. The next one is going to be 7 plus 13, which is 20. The next one is 7 plus 13 plus 14, which is 34, so we're still not there yet. Then it's 7 plus 13 plus 14 plus 12, which is 46. So we can see it's going to sit in this interval here, which is 40 to 50. On the grid below, draw a frequency polygon. So one thing you want to remember with polygons, frequency polygons, is you're going to plot it against the midpoint. So it's not going to be against the end number. It's going to be against the midpoint. So the midpoint, I'll just write them down. It will be 15 here, 25 here, 35 here, 45 is the midpoint of that, 55 here, and 65 here. And if you want to work at the midpoint, you can just do 10 plus 20, divide that by 2, and that will give you the midpoint for all. And you'll do the same with the rest of the classes, but yeah. If you now look at plotting that, so the first point is 15 and 7. So the first thing you want to recognize, if I zoom in a little bit here, is each of these points goes up by 1 for every 2 points. Okay, that is important to note. So the first one is 15 and 7, sorry. So 15 is going to be here, and 7, so we have 5, 6, 7, it will be there. The next one is 25 and 20. So that is 25 and 13. 11, 12, 13. The next one is 35 and 14. Next one is 45 and 12. And the next one is 55 and 16. And the last one is 65 and 18. And now you want to use a ruler to connect all these points together. So just do that. And it has to be straight lines using a ruler. So let me just zoom out. So we have a time series graph shows the numbers in thousands of visitors to a fun park. Okay, write down two things that could be misleading with this graph. So always start by looking at the axis. So have a look at the y-axis, have a look at the x-axis, and hopefully you can notice that this is missing 9.5. So it goes 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5, and then we can just write 9.5 is missing on y-axis. And then the other thing that's wrong with it, it should be joined together using straight lines, not curves. Points should be connected. So points connected using straight lines. And not curves. So moving on to 5, we have been given a hexagon. The hexagon has one line of symmetry, so that means if I was to cut it down the middle, both sides are the exact same. So in essence, what that means is if that angle is 117, this angle here is also 117. So I'll just break that line off. So that's what this bit here means. So we've been given some information. Okay, FA is equal to BC, EF is equal to CD. We are told that BDC is 2 times CDE. So BCD, which is this angle here, is 2 times whatever this angle here is. So if this is x, that's 2x. And remember, because it's symmetrical, the shape, it'll be the exact same on the opposite side. Work out the size of angle AFE. Okay, so that's that angle there. So since we've been given all the interior angles, we probably want to work out the sum of all the interior angles inside here. And the way we can do that is, so sum of interior angles, so that's going to be n minus 2 times 180, where n is the number of sides. So in this case, there's 6 sides. So we're going to do 6 minus 2 times that by 180, and you get 720. So now you know all the angles inside add up to 720. So now we can say that all the angles inside, so let's add them up, 2x plus 2x plus x plus x plus 117 plus 117 are equal to 720. If I collect like terms together, I get 6x plus 234 is equal to 720. If I subtract 234 from each side, I get 6x is equal to 486. And if I divide each side by 6, I can work out what x is, and that comes to 81. But now bear in mind, for the question it asked for AFE, and AFE is 2x, so AFE is 2 times 81, which is 162. So moving on to question 6, Jeremy has to cover 3 tanks completely with paint. So just note the wording there, it's saying cover, not fill. So by cover, it's going to be the outside, so we're going to be looking at surface area. Each tank is in the shape of a cylinder with a top and a bottom. The tank diameter is 1.6 and it's given the height as well. He has 7 tins of paint. Each tin covers 5 meters cubed. Has Jeremy got enough paint to cover the 3 tanks completely? So, okay, so we need to work out how much paint is required for 1 tank first. So to work out the paint for 1 tank, we need to work out the surface area. Now for the surface area, we're going to need this top surface here. We're going to need this bottom surface here. And then we're going to need this surface, like the curved bit around the side. So that there. So I'm going to cross this red one off because it can get a bit in the way, but first we just draw that, the surface area of this bit here, the actual cylinder. So if you work out the surface area of tank, so that is going to be, so there's a circle at the top and a circle at the bottom, so we're going to have two lots of pi r squared, so that's the green circles, so that's going to cover the surface area of that and the surface area of that, and then we're going to add to this the surface area of this bit here. And the way we do that is we're going to find the circumference, which is going to be 2 pi r, so 2 times pi r, and we're going to times that by the height, which is 1.8. So the radius in this case, we've been given the diameter, the radius is just half of this, so that's going to be 0.8. If I sub that in, we have 2 pi 0.8 squared plus 2 pi 0.8 times 1.8. And you can type all of that into your calculator and hit enter, and you would get 13.06902544 meters squared. So that's for one tank. So 3 tanks surface area is going to be 3 times that number. And that becomes 39.2070763 meters squared. And now we need to work out if he's got enough. So each tin covers 5 meters squared. So 7 tins. So that's going to be 7 times 5, which is 35 meters squared. And you can see it's not going to be enough because we need 39.21 if you round that. So you must show your working out. So the question was, has he got enough? So we need to leave a statement. So no, he does not have enough. It's also good to reference the numbers in your answer. So you would write something like 7 tins cover 35 meters squared, but 3 tanks need 39.21 meters squared. Question 7, you can just type that directly into your calculator and you get the answer. Just round that to 3 significant figures, and that becomes 0.319. So we have a right angle triangle here. Sarah is trying to find this side. Let's just call it x. Well, actually, let's not call it x. That might be confusing because the question is using BC. So she has done, to work out BC, she's done a squared plus ab squared plus ac squared. So she's using Pythagoras theorem. So what is the problem with this? So the problem with this is, in order for her to work out bc squared, it's not the longest side, it's a shorter side. So she's going to have to subtract ac squared from ab squared. That's what she needs to do. So is the correct solution. Well, you can just write that, and that's enough because you've spotted what's wrong and you fixed it. So moving on to the next one, Roy is going to enlarge PQR with the center C by a square factor of 1.5. He draws X, Y, Z. Explain why Roy is not correct. So if you look at what he's done from the center here, he's enlarged this shape. So he has gone 1, 2, 3, 4 across. And in order to get to the next point, so if you look at this point, has gone from there to there. And if you look at what's happened to the scale factor, I'll use a different color. It's gone from 1 to, or if I just rub that off, actually, it's gone from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So actually, he's gone across. This is, I'll use the same color again. So we have 4 from here to here, and then from here to here, it's 10. So that's not quite 1.5. So the scale factor is actually 2.5. So he's used the wrong scale factor essentially. So you would write that so it's enlarged by scale factor of 2.5, not 1.5. So this is one of the trickier questions on this paper. So a company has to make a large number of boxes. The company has 6 machines. All machines work at the same rate. When all machines are working, they can make 9 boxes. They can make all the boxes in 9 days. The table below gives the number of machines working each day. Work at the total number of days it takes to make all boxes. So there's a number of things we need to consider with this one, but the first one is, well, actually, I think the best way for me to start this question is talking about the machines and days. So we have 6 machines, and we know they take 9 days. Now, how long will one machine take? And this is where people tend to go wrong, because they divide this by 6, which is fine, but you're not going to divide this by 6, you're going to times it by 6. Because if you think about it, if 6 machines are taking 9 days, you can almost think of it as taps of water. If 5 taps are filling a bucket and they take 10 minutes, how long is one tap going to take? It's not going to take less time, it's going to take more time, because it's now just one tap. So it's the same with machines. If you have less machines, it will take longer. So just bear that in mind. A lot of people get it wrong here. So you do get 1 mark just for doing this. But in order to make this question a bit simpler, if I was to list out some days, so we have day 1, day 2, day 9, day 10. Let's just do day 11 as well. So the question is telling us that right here, they have 6 machines, and when all of them are working, it takes 9 days. So what it's saying is, if they have 6 machines, it takes 9 days. So if I just write that out, okay, so that's what the question's already told us. And then if you look at this bit here, this table that they've given us, they've told us on day 1, I'll use a different color actually. On day 1, they've used 3. On day 2, they've used 5. On day 4, on day 3, they've used 5, and then all the other days they've used 6, and they're asking how long will it take. So hopefully straight away, you should know that the answer is going to be more than 9 days, because if you look at the machine on day 1, 2, and 3, it's less than 6, right? So it's going to take us longer than 9 days. So if you were to add this together, 5 plus 4 is 9, plus 3 is 12. So that's 12 altogether. And if you look at the total up until this point, so that's going to be 6 times 9, so that's 9 days, which is 54. So if you do 54 minus 12, that gives us 42. And we can divide that by 6. So I'll do that on the next line actually. 42, divide that by 6, and that gives me 7. So we're going to need 6 for 7 days. And that takes 10 days altogether. And now if you're still a little bit confused about this bit here, and you shouldn't be confused about this bit here though, that's just taking 6 machines taking 9 days, so that's 54 altogether. You need to get the total to 54. Another way you can look at it is, you could have done something like, if that's 12, if you add 6 to 12, then add 6 again, and keep adding 6, and you'll notice that when you get here, this number here is 48 if you add all of these together. And then what do you add to 48? Well, if you use 6 again the next day, you get to 54. That's another way you could have looked at it. But hopefully, I've gone in quite a bit of detail with this one, because it can be a little bit confusing, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So with question 10, Marie invests £8,000 in an account for 1 year. So we know she's invested £8,000. She pays tax on the interest rate of 20%. So we know there's some sort of interest that's being put on it. And she's paid on this interest 20% tax, which is £28.80. So that means 100%. So if I times both sides by 5, it's going to be 144. So this amount here is 144. So if you do 8,000 plus 144, you get 8,144. And then if you do 8,144, divide that by 8,000, and you would get an answer of 1.018. So that's 8144 divided that by 8,000. So moving on to question 11. In 2019, the distance between Earth and Mars was 3.9 times 10 to the power of 7. In May 2019, a signal was sent from Earth to Mars. Assuming the signal sent from Earth to Mars traveled at a speed of 3 times 10 to the power of 5 meters per second, how long did the signal take to get to Mars? So speed is distance over time. And with speed, we are told it's 3 times 10 to the power of 5. The distance is 3.9 times 10 to the power of 7. And we need to work out the time, so we can rearrange this equation, and it'll be 3.9 times 10 to the power of 7 divided by 3 times 10 to the power of 5. So that means time is 130 seconds. So part B, the speed of the signal was actually less. So if you decrease this, you can type down your calculator. If you decrease this value of 3 times 10 to the power of 5, you can just see what happens, and you'll see if you made that something like, for example, 2 times 10 to the power of 7, you can see it will increase the time. So moving on to question 12, Patrick has to work out the exact value of the 4th root of 64. Patrick says 1/4 of 64 is 16, so 64 to the power of 1/4 must be 16. Why is he wrong? Because, well, 64 is essentially finding the 4th root of 64 is 4th root of 64. And you can also type that in your calculator since it is a calculator paper. And remember the power of 4. So if I type that in, I think the answer is something like 2.82. Moving on to question 13, the density of ethanol is 1.09 grams per centimeters cubed. The density of propylene is 0.97 grams per centimeters cubed. 60 liters of ethanol are mixed with 128 liters of propylene to make 188 liters of antifreeze. Look at the density of the antifreeze. Give your answer to 2 decimal places. So with this kind of question, you're going to draw out a table. So remember that density is equal to mass over volume is the formula we'll be needing. So we will have 3 columns, something like so. So we have density, mass, and volume. And then we've got the 3 liquids. So that's ethanol, propylene, and the antifreeze. So we have ethanol, propylene, and the antifreeze. So we know the density is 1.09 for this and 0.97 for this. And we know they are mixed together to make 128 liters of this. 188 liters, of this. And 60 liters. So that's all given from there, there, and there. Work out the density of the antifreeze. So to work out the density of the antifreeze, you cannot just add these two together. You need to work out the mass, the total mass, and divide it by the total volume. So we need to find what this is and what this is, and then add it together to give us what this down here is. So the mass is density times volume. So that here is going to be 1.09 times 60. And if you type that in your calculator, you would get 65.4. And same here, we have dense mass is equal to density times volume. So that's 0.97 times that by 128. And that gives you 124.16. And to work out the mass, we can add these two together. So remember, we can add the mass and we can add the volumes, but we cannot add the density. So now to work out the density of the antifreeze, we will have the total mass divided by the total volume, which is 189.56 divided by 188, and that to 2 decimal places is 1.01. So question 14, the diagram shows a rectangle and 2 congruent triangles, AFE and DCE. So the congruent just means they're exactly the same. The area of rectangle ABDE is equal to the area of both of the triangles essentially added together. So what it's saying is I was supposed to use a highlighter there, so let me just change that. What it's saying is if you want to find the area of this, it's equal to the area of this and this added together. And we're also told that AB, let's just call that X, is 3 times AB to AE is 1 to 3. So if that's X, this is 3X. Let's just label all of them. Right, so work out the length of AE. Okay. So let's start by looking at piecing together this equation they've given us here. So the first bit is area of rectangle ABDE. So area. So we're going to make a start and we're going to see what values we can find and what we can do with it. So we know the area of ABDE is going to be 3x times x, which is 3x squared. Okay, and then next, I know both triangles have the exact same area, so I can just find either one. It'll be the exact same for them. So we'll do area of AFE, which is going to be, we're going to use the formula a half AB sine C, so that's going to be a half. A, you can say that's 24, B can be 3x, and sine C is sine 30, so that's going to be a half times 24, which is 12, and then we have 3x, and then sine 30 is just a half, and then that leaves us with 18x. So now if we go back and look at the formula in the question, we know what this is, and now we also know what this is because they're both the same. So we can write 3x squared is equal to 18x plus 18x, and 18 plus 18 gives us 36. So we have 3x squared is equal to 36x. I can divide each side by 3, and that gives me 12x. And I can divide each side by x to get x as 12. And now the question did ask for AE. So AE is 3x, so that's going to be 3 times 12, which is 36. 15, the graph of curves C with equation y is equal to f of x is transformed to give the graph of curve S with the equation y is equal to f of minus x minus 3. The point on C with coordinates 7, 2 is mapped to the point Q on S. Find the coordinates of Q. Okay, seems like a very confusing question, but a graph will help us here. So if I plot on the coordinates, so we have this curve. Okay, the point C is mapped to Q on S. So we have a point of 7, 2, which is there. That's point C. It's mapped to point Q. Okay, so we have this curve C. So there's a point on the curve, which is that one there. So if you think about it, this at the minute what we have here is f of x. So the first thing we can do is f of minus x. So that will be reflecting it in the y-axis. So that point now moves here, which is minus 7. And then finally, if you look at the last bit, which is that minus 3. So we've done this bit. If you minus 3 from it, we're just going to move down in the y-axis by 3. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3. So that's a minus 1 there. So this point then ends up here, which has the coordinates of minus 7, minus 1. So hopefully you can see how I've done that. We started with this and we ended up with this. So we first looked at this bit here, which was the minus x, and then we looked at minus 3. So here are the first 6 terms of a quadratic sequence. Find an expression in terms of n for the sequence. So to find this, the way I like to explain it is, so it actually makes sense what's going on. It's, we have this formula a n squared plus bn plus c, and if I sub 1 into the sequence, so say n is 1, we end up with a plus b plus c, so that is n is equal to 1, and if I have n is equal to 2, we end up with 4a plus 2b plus c. And then I just need to do one more. If I have n is equal to 3, I have 9a plus 3b plus c. Now if I find the difference, it'll make sense in a second why I'm doing this, but all I've done so far is wrote a quadratic equation, subbed in n is 1, 2, 3, so the first 3 terms in the sequence. Now I'm going to find the difference between them, so from here to here, and then here to here. So to go from left to right, we're adding 3a, and then we're adding 1b, and then from there to there, we're adding 5a, and we're adding 1b, and finally I'm going to do the same here. I'll use a different color. So to go from there to there, we're adding 2a, and that is all we're doing. And if you're wondering why I did this, it'll make sense in just a minute. So now if I look at the question, if I write out some values, we have -1, 5, 15. How do I go from, I'll write this a little bit lower actually, just so it's on the same line. Let me just grab that, move. Let me just grab that again. Awesome. Now I'll use the same colors as well, so it's a little bit easier to follow along. So if I use my blue lines again, so to go from -1 to 5, there's a difference of 6. From 5 to 15, there's a difference of 10. I'll use this. And from there to there, there is a difference of 4. So now we have 2a here, and we have 4 here. So we can now write that 2a is equal to 4, which means a is equal to 2. So we figured out what a is. Now, let me just change my highlighter. If I use a blue one, I have 6 here, and I have 3a plus b here. So if I have 3a plus b is equal to 6, I know what a is, because I've figured that out, so I can do 3. I can write that like that. So that is 6 plus b is equal to 6. Now you can hopefully see b must be 0. So we have now also calculated b as 0. And finally, we want to work out c, so we can just go 1 up now. So that's going to be that -1 and this equation right here. So we have a plus b plus c is equal to -1. I know what a is, I know what b is, I haven't worked out what c is yet. So we have 2 plus c is equal to -1, and hopefully you can see here that c must be -3. So we have now worked out a, b, and c, and now we can sub it all into this equation up here. So that now becomes, if I just write that down here, that now becomes a is 2, so that's 2n squared, b is 0, so we can ignore that, and c is -3, and that is your answer, 2n squared -3. Again, I've gone into detail on this, but hopefully you can see with the colors where everything's coming from and why we did it the way we did it. So here's 4 graphs. F of x is inversely proportional to the square of x. That is P trig, and that's A, D, and C. So show that when you expand all 3 of these brackets out, you end up with something that looks in the form ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. So let's write this out. So I like to work from left to right, so I'm going to expand, I'm going to multiply this by this, and then this by this. I'm going to keep the brackets, and you'll see why in a second. So that's going to be 2x squared plus 3x, plus 6x, and then I'm going to multiply 1 by x and 1 by 3, and that's going to be plus 1x plus 3, and then 3x plus 7. Now I'm going to collect the like terms together, so that's 2x squared plus 7x plus 3 and 3x plus 7. And now I'm going to expand out these two, so we are going to take the 2 and multiply it by that, and then that, so that will become, we no longer need the bracket, so that becomes 6x cubed plus 14x squared. Now I'll look at this 7 here, so there's 7 and 3 and 7x and 7. So that becomes 21x squared plus 49x plus 9x plus 21. So I've also done the 3 there as well, but I can draw the lines on like so. And now it's the time to collect the like terms. So that and that are both x squared, that and that are both x. So that then becomes 6x cubed plus 35x squared plus 58x plus 21. So with B, before I do answer this question, it's just worth bearing this in mind. So if you have x squared is greater than 4, if you square root both sides, when you square root a number, you end up with two values. So the square root of 4 is actually plus and minus 2. So in this case, you end up with x is greater than 2 and x is less than minus 2. And if you're confused as to why that is, if you were to just draw out a few numbers, 0, 1, minus 1, 2, minus 2, and you can sort of see here, if x was 0, that would be false. If x was 1, it would be, is 1 greater than 4? That would be false. So that means you can't have any of these values. So for example, if x was 2, is 2 squared is greater than 4? No. Is 1 squared greater than 4? No. Is 0 squared greater than 4? No. So the values that satisfy this inequality are x is greater than 2 or x is less than minus 2. Because if it was minus 3, if you square a negative number, it becomes positive. Then it becomes 9 is greater than 4. So hopefully this bit is key for this question. When you square root something, you end up with two values and the signs flip. Okay, you keep the sign for the positive, you flip the sign for the negative. So now that I've said that, the first thing you want to spot with this question is that's a square, and these are both square numbers. So you end up with 1 minus x is less than 9 over 25, and you can square root both sides, so that's a square root there, which gets rid of the square. And then that can be written as 3 over 5, and I'll write the plus and minus in there. So now remember, with the positive, we keep the sign, so I'll write that here. If you have 1 minus x is less than 3 over 5. With the negative, we flip the sign. Okay, and now we solve the 2, so we'll start with solving the one on the left. So if I subtract 1 from each side, I get minus x is greater than minus 8 over 5. If I times both sides by negative 1 to get rid of the negative, and when you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign, so that'll be x is less than 8 over 5. And on the right hand side, we can do the same, minus 1, so you have x that is less than minus 2 over 5, and then we have x is greater than 2 over 5. So that is our answer, and we can write this as 2 over 5 less than x less than 8 over 5, and that's the same with this. We could have wrote this as that too. So question 19, d is equal to u squared over 2a. U is 26.2, correct to 3 significant figures. A is 4.3, correct to 2 significant figures. Calculate the upper bound for the value of d. Give your answer correct to 6 significant figures. You must show all your working. So a point worth bearing in mind here is when you have fractions and you're working out the upper bounds. For example, the upper bound of b means we're going to need the upper bound of the numerator and the lower bound of the denominator. That's what this question is asking for. But if you were working out the lower bound too, which we don't need to, you would have the lower bound of the numerator and the upper bound of the denominator. That's just something worth bearing in mind. So in this case, we're going to be looking at this. So we need the upper bound of u and the lower bound of a. So u at the minute is 26.2 to 1 to 3 significant figures. So we can write 0.1, divide that by 2, which is 0.05. So to get the upper bound, we're just going to add 0.05 onto this. So that gives me 26.25. And for a, we need the lower bound. So a at the minute is 4.3. So 0.1, divide that by 2, that gives me 0.05. And we're going to subtract 0.05 from this. So that becomes 4.25. And now we're going to sub that into the equation. So we have d is equal to 26.25 squared all over 2 times 4.25, which is 81.0662 to 6 significant figures. The lower bound for d is 78.003, correct to 6 significant figures. By considering bound, write down a value for d to a suitable degree of accuracy. So typically you want to round it in a way so that they both are in agreement. So in this case, we can round them both to 80, both bounds. So you could write both bounds round to 80 at the nearest 10. So both upper and lower bound round to 80 at nearest 10. Solve algebraically simultaneous equations. So in this case, you typically want to rearrange the equation without the squares in it and substitute that in. But there's many different ways you can approach it. So we have equation 1 and equation 2 here. So let's write out equation 1 again. So we have x squared plus, no, not plus, minus 4y squared is equal to 9. And then I have 3x for equation 2 plus 4y is equal to 7. So here I want to rearrange it for x or y and then substitute them in. So I'm going to rearrange this for x. So we have 3x is equal to 7 minus 4y, and x then becomes 7 over 3 minus 4y over 3. So now I've written it in terms of x, I can substitute this into equation 1. I'll keep writing the numbers because they're good reference. So we're now looking at equation 1, which is up here. I'm going to substitute x into there. So that then becomes 7 over 3 minus 4y over 3. Because it's squared, I'm going to write it out twice. And I forgot the minus 4y. Right, so that becomes that. Now we're going to expand the brackets. So that is, again, you can use your calculator for this too, if you need, but you can just do it like this as well. Plus 16 over 9y squared minus 4y squared is equal to 9. Now we're going to collect the like terms together. So that's going to be these two and these two. So that's minus 20 over 9y squared minus 56 over 9y plus 49 over 9 is equal to 9. So at this point, what you can do is get rid of the denominators because they're all the same. So we can times this side by 9 times this side by 9, and that gets rid of all the denominators. So we are left with minus 20y squared minus 56y plus 49 is equal to 9, 81. And now we can subtract 81 from each side to make the equation equal to 0. So we have minus 20y squared minus 56y minus 32 is equal to 0. I can times the equation by minus 1 to make it all positive. This just makes life a little bit easier. Right, so I now have this equation in this form. I can use the quadratic formula and my calculator to figure out what y is. So just to remind you what the quadratic formula looks like. So that looks something like b plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Remember, it is a plus and a minus, so you're going to end up with two values, and you end up with y is equal to minus 2, and y is equal to minus 4 over 5. Right, now what you can do is substitute these values into equation 2. So if I just scroll back up to the top, you're now going to sub in the values for y into this, one at a time, and you're going to figure out what x is. So just to quickly show you one of them, so if you were working with 3x plus 4y is equal to 7. If I sub into here the minus 2, so we have 3x plus 4 minus 2 is equal to 7. I can add 8 to each side, so we have that, and you end up with x is equal to 5. So we have y is equal to minus 2, x is equal to 5, and we have y is equal to minus 4 over 5, and x is equal to 17 over 5. The histogram gives information about the distribution of the weights of some onions grown by a farmer. Onions less than 60 grams in weight are used for picking. Okay, so anything less than 60 grams is used for picking. Onions greater than 120 are sold at the market. Okay. and the rest of the onions are sent to food processing, so that would be whatever's left in the middle. So from 60 to 120. What is the question asking for? Okay, so a pie chart is drawn using the information opposite to show what the farmer does with the onions he grows. The angle of the sector for the onions sent to the food processing is X. Work at the value of X. So remember, these pie charts are out of a total of 360 degrees. So we need to work out the proportion that is sent. So we're gonna figure that out using this diagram up here. So let me just change colors to make sure I'm keeping that. So the first region we need to look at is 0 to 60. So in the case of 0 to 60, we have the height is 2, the frequency density, sorry, I should say is 2. We're going to times that by the rate, which is 60, so that is 120 here. Then we change colors. So the next bit is from 60 to 120. However, there are 2 bars in that range. The first bar is from 60 to 90, and that is 5 times 30, which is 150. The second bar is 90 to 120, and that is 9 times 30, which is 270. And then the last bar is 120 to 180. Well, again, it's 2 bars. So that is from 120 to 135. And just, you need to be a bit accurate with this one. So if you just look, if I just zoom into this, if this is 30 and there's 5 squares between that, that means each square is 6. So each of these squares is 6. That means this is going to be 126. We're going to add 6 here, and this is halfway between. So that's going to be 6 plus 6 plus 3. So that is how I get 135. And then the next bit is going to be, if I just stay there, is going to be from 135 to 180. So this then becomes 6 times 15, and this becomes 2 times 45, which is 90, and that is 92. So now I can work out the totals. So if I use that color there, that is 120. This totals up to 420, and this totals up to 180. So this is what is sent for food processing. If I now scroll down, so to work out the angle, we're going to do 420, which is sent, and divide that by the total, which is 420 plus 180 plus 120, and we're going to times that by the angle of 360, and that gives us a value of 210 degrees. Moving on to question 22, we have a circle. AB is a tangent to the circle at point A. Remember, the tangent meets a circle at 90 degrees. So we've been given an angle of OAB. We have point P and point B. Find your value of P. Find the value of P. Give your answer to 1 decimal place. Okay. So they want us to find P. And when you don't really know where to start, again, just start by piecing together what you can. What do you know about circles? So it would be useful. We want to work out what P is here. And in order to work out P, it would be useful. So this would be 3P, and this would be P. If you don't know what the radius is, it would be useful if you know the radius. But we know one other thing, that point A connects with 0 to the tangent meets the circle at 90 degrees. So we know that's 90 degrees. And we know that is also the radius. So this line here is the radius. This line here is also the radius. The radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the circumference. So if we can work out what the radius here is, we can use that radius there. And if it's not clear how we're going to use it, let's just work it out for now, and you'll start to see how we use it. But just for a bit of clarity, I'm going to draw that triangle out down here. So I'm just going to label my sides. So that's B, that's O, and that's A. So one thing worth noting is this length here is 16. And how do I know that? Because of this x coordinate. So, and I know this is a right angle. and I'm trying to find this side, which is r, the radius. So I can use a bit of Pythagoras. So this is the opposite, that's the hypotenuse, that's the adjacent. I don't know anything about the adjacent, so I can ignore that. And that to me looks like a sine rule. So sine 30 is equal to the opposite, which is the radius, divided by the hypotenuse. So the radius is 16 times sine 30. I know sine 30 is a half, so that is going to be 8. So I now know what the radius is. And you might still be wondering, well, how does that actually help us in any way? But so we figured out that this is 8 and this is also 8. So if I was to draw out, I would draw it out here, but I think I want to draw it up here so I can keep the diagram in view. If I was to draw out the triangle there, so imagine this is point P, right? And we know that the height, actually I'm gonna rub this off. So what I've drawn here is just to show you my highlighter, is that there. That's what I've drawn right here. I know the height is 3p. I know along x it's p, and I know this is 8 because I've worked out the radius. And I want to work out what p is, and we can use Pythagoras theorem. So we know that 3p squared plus p squared is equal to 8 squared. So that's the same as the usual a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So that becomes 9p squared plus p squared is equal to 64, which then becomes 10p squared is equal to 64. I can divide each side by 10. So that gives me p squared is equal to 6.4. And then we're left with p. So we can square root each side, and that gives me 2.5. And that is your, is that what it asked for? Yep, that is your answer to one decimal place. So question 23, the diagram shows the positions of 3 towns, Acton, Braston, and Horton. So Braston is 8 kilometers from Acton at a bearing of 037. And then we have some other information as well, but we can see all of that in the diagram. It wants me to find the bearing of Horton from Acton. So if I was just to draw that, just to clarify that, what it wants me to find is this full angle here. That's what the question is asking for. So all I need to essentially find is this angle here and add it to 37. And that is what the question is asking for. So hopefully by looking at that, you can see it's a triangle. And you want to see what else you can figure out with this triangle. Now, one thing I can immediately see is you want to know with bearings. So this angle and this angle add up to 180. So that means that angle there is going to be 180 minus 37, which is 143. Now you might be wondering why I figured that out, because it would be nice for me to know an extra angle in this triangle. So now I know angles around a point add up to 360, so I can do 360, take away 143, take away 150, and that gives me this angle at 67 degrees. So I'll now draw this triangle separate from the diagram, because I think it will make it a little bit easier to view. So if I draw out the exact same triangle, let me just label the side. So that is A, that is B, that is C. This is angle 67. This is 8. This is 9. And remember, what we're trying to figure out is this angle here, and we're going to add that to 37, and that is essentially what the question, that is the solution to our problem, this angle here. So hopefully, by looking at this triangle, you can see we're not going to be working out area, we're working out sides or angles in this case, right, to solve the problem. And you should start thinking about the sine and cosine rules. So if you were to start thinking about the sine rule, you have sine A over A is equal to sine B over B, which is equal to sine C over C. Now, the problem we have is we need at least 3 variables to figure out the angle. So for example, we have sine A over A, which is 9. We have sine B, which is 67, but then we don't have the side. But then with C, we have the side, but we don't have the angle. So essentially, to solve this problem, I either need to find side B or the angle C. I'm going to go with the approach that finds side B. So that is going to be B squared is equal to A squared plus C squared minus 2AC cos B. So that's the formula I'm using. I don't know what B squared is, but I know A squared is 9 squared plus 8 squared minus 2 times 8 times 9. I know what the angle is, that's 67. So I can now type all of that into my calculator, and when you type all of that into your calculator, you will end up with a value that you need to square root. So you're going to end up with something like 88 point, well, I should get rid of the square root. You'll end up with 88.73471. Oh, let me just get my pen back. But that is B squared, and in order to work out B, you're going to have to square root that, which then gives you 9.419910695. Now we know what B is, we can now use this formula here. So we now have sine A over 9 is equal to sine 67 over 9.419910695. And we can solve this, and we will figure out the angle as A is equal to 61.57. Now remember, the question is asking for find the bearing, right? And it wants this full bearing of C from A. So what we've just figured out is this bit here, which is 61.57. We're going to have to add that to 37. So we're going to do 61.57. We're going to add that to 37, and we end up 98.6. And remember, the question's asking for a bearing. Bearings are always to 3 figures, so that's going to be written as that. So I hope you found this video useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.